The signal was faint, crackling with static, but it pierced through the vast emptiness of space like a beacon. The transmission was a jumble of garbled words and distress codes, but to the trained eye, it was clear enough. The signal had been sent by a ship in distress, one that was teetering on the edge of destruction. Its origin was unknown, but it was somewhere deep in a forgotten sector of the galaxy, a place where even the most daring explorers seldom ventured. Kreth Fleet Commander Drath Fair watched the screen intently, his alien fingers hovering over the controls of the console. He wasn't the first to notice the SOS. His communications officer, a sharp and calculating individual named Cyrith, had caught it first. But Drath's mind was already calculating the possibilities. The Kreth were a race of diplomats and strategists, always looking for the opportunity to expand their influence in the galaxy. They had seen humanity's rise with growing concern, but they had not yet directly confronted the human fleet. Now, however, fate had handed them an opportunity. "Is the signal a trap?" Drath asked, voice steady but with a hint of tension. Cyrith shook his head, scanning through the data. "No signs of subterfuge. It's a distress signal, Commander, no question about it. The distress codes match those of a species we've never encountered before. It could be valuable." Drath leaned back in his seat, considering. The human fleet, known across the galaxy as the Deathworlders, had earned a reputation for brutality. The Kreth had no love for them, but they had never been in direct conflict. Drath had seen the reports. The humans were adaptable, dangerous, and capable of surviving in conditions that would break most other species. But so far, the Deathworlders had been content to remain isolated, expanding only where they could not be ignored. A small part of Drath hoped that this signal wasn't a Deathworlder trap. His fleet had faced many enemies, but none like the humans. If this was a ploy, the consequences would be disastrous for the Kreth. But another part of him saw opportunity. If the species that sent the signal was weak and unprepared, this could be an easy conquest, a feather in the cap of the Kreth. "We will respond," Drath said after a long pause. "Prepare the fleet for departure. We'll follow the coordinates and offer assistance. If this species is a threat, we will deal with it accordingly. If they are weak, we may be able to leverage their technology." The communications officer input the coordinates, and Drath watched as the Kreth fleet, sleek and angular, began to move toward the source of the distress signal. It was a calculated risk, but Drath had confidence in his strategy. The galaxy was full of strange and dangerous species, but the Kreth had outlasted most of them through diplomacy and military might. They had learned the art of survival. But as the fleet drifted deeper into the unknown sector, Drath couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The signal had been too urgent, too desperate. And now, as the Kreth fleet neared the edge of the asteroid belt, where the signal had originated, he could feel the weight of that uncertainty pressing down on him. Before they could reach the source, the light of distant stars flickered and dimmed. The darkness of space seemed to thicken, and an eerie silence filled the communication channels. It was then that Drath realized he had made a grave mistake, and it was too late to turn back. Alana Graves stood at the helm of the Vengeful Dawn, her fingers lightly drumming on the cold, metallic console as she observed the data streaming across the screen. Her face was calm, eyes sharp with focus. The distress signal had reached her fleet almost simultaneously with the Kreth's interception, and within moments, her mind had already processed what the rest of her command team was still debating. The Kreth were on the move, and they didn't have a clue what they were heading into. "Commander Graves," came the voice of her second-in-command, Lieutenant Kellen. He was a stocky man, a veteran of 100 skirmishes, with a face carved from experience. He didn't mince words. "The Kreth fleet is moving towards the coordinates. If they're responding to the SOS, they'll be there within the hour. Should we intercept?" Alana's lips curled into a grim smile. Her fingers paused, resting on the console as she leaned forward, watching the projected path of the Kreth ships. She had anticipated their move. The Kreth were nothing if not predictable. They saw an opportunity. An unknown species in distress, weak, vulnerable. They had no idea that this was all a trap, set with precise calculations by the humans themselves. "No," Alana replied, her voice cold as steel. "We don't intercept. We wait." There was a flicker of hesitation from Lieutenant Kellen, but he said nothing. He had learned to trust her decisions implicitly. Alana Graves had never been wrong in her command, and that's what made her so feared across the galaxy. "Understood, Commander," Kellen said, his tone resolute. Alana's eyes never left the screen. It was the perfect trap. The Deathworlder fleet was notorious for its ability to adapt, to use the most extreme tactics in warfare, tactics that no one, not even the Kreth, could predict. The distress signal wasn't from an unknown species at all. It was an intentionally vague transmission, designed to lure the Kreth into a false sense of security. And once they were in position, they would be trapped in a coordinated, merciless ambush. "Fleet status," Alana asked without looking away from the display. "Ready and waiting," Kellen responded. "All ships are in position. The moment we give the signal, we're primed to launch. Stealth tech is active. They won't see us coming." A cold silence filled the command deck. Alana could feel the buzz of anticipation ripple through her crew. The Deathworlders had been waiting for a chance to strike, to show the galaxy just how dangerous they were. The Kreth were about to give them that chance. The seconds stretched out. Then, a sharp chime rang through the bridge, alerting them to the arrival of the Kreth fleet at the coordinates. Alana's eyes narrowed as she gave a slow, deliberate nod. The time had come. "Activate cloaking systems. Prepare for engagement." At her command, the fleet's ships, each one designed for the most hostile of environments, shifted into position with mechanical precision. Their sleek, dark hulls blended seamlessly into the space around them, invisible to the naked eye, rendering them nearly undetectable to the Kreth's scanners. Alana turned to Kellen. "Let's show them who they're really dealing with." The first strike came not from a weapon, but from the vengeful dawn itself. The ship's engines flared with sudden intensity, accelerating towards the Kreth formation faster than any of them could react. In the space of mere seconds, the Deathworlder fleet revealed itself, emerging from the black void in a sudden, terrifying flash of motion. Before the Kreth could even process what had happened, the battle was already underway. The Deathworlders didn't waste time on flashy tactics or showmanship. They struck first, fast, and with brutal precision. Massive cannons aboard the Vengeful Dawn roared to life, launching devastating blasts that tore through the nearest Kreth ship like paper. The Kreth vessels, designed for agility and speed, were no match for the Deathworlders' firepower. Each ship's shields flared and then failed as the Deathworlders pounded them relentlessly, disintegrating the alien defenses in a hail of fire. The Kreth scrambled to organize a defense, but it was too late. The Deathworlders were already inside their ranks. Human boarding parties, armed with advanced weapons and gear suited for extreme conditions, stormed the enemy ships. They moved with terrifying efficiency, sweeping through the Kreth like a wildfire, using their alien technology against them. Alana watched the carnage unfold, her expression one of cold satisfaction. This wasn't just a battle, it was a statement. The galaxy needed to learn what it meant to face the Deathworlder fleet, and the Kreth were about to be the first to understand. The battle was just beginning, and already it was clear that the Deathworlders weren't just another species in the galaxy. They were the apex predators, and the Kreth would learn that lesson the hard way. The Kreth fleet moved cautiously through the debris field, their ships sleek and angular, designed for agility but not resilience. They were aware of the reports, rumors, really, of the Deathworlders' deadly efficiency, but they had yet to witness it firsthand. Their commanders, confident in the intelligence they'd gathered, saw no immediate threat. They had already decided that this was an opportunity to showcase their power, to assert their dominance over a species they assumed to be weak. Commander Drathver stood at the helm of the flagship Tyrannox, watching the approaching coordinates on the screen. The SOS had been their first clue, And now, the enemy ships, whatever species they were waiting for rescue. In Drath's mind, this was a simple tactical operation, a rescue mission to a species in distress, followed by a show of force to demonstrate Kreth's supremacy. I don't see why we're not simply boarding them now, Cyrith, his tactical officer, remarked from his station. Their ship seems unprotected. We should seize it before they can regroup. Drath paused, considering the suggestion. The fleet had made the mistake of underestimating too many enemies before. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. His hand hovered over the controls, and then he looked out at the black void of space, where the Deathworlder's ships were rumored to operate. No, we'll wait for them to show themselves, Drath replied, his voice steady, but tinged with a growing unease. Let's see how they react to our arrival. If they're as dangerous as we've been led to believe, we'll deal with them accordingly. There was an undeniable air of confidence in his words, but it masked a creeping tension in the pit of his stomach. His gut told him something was off, but the data didn't lie. The Kreth ships had superior firepower, faster responses, and far better shields than any species they'd encountered. Surely, this would be no different. But as the fleet moved deeper into the sector, the eerie silence that had gripped the region began to feel heavier, thicker, almost unnatural. Drath frowned and looked to his communication officer. Scan for anomalies. I don't like this. Moments later, a low alarm began to hum through the ship. On the screen, an array of strange readings flickered. Energy fluctuations, gravitational disturbances, and something else. A subtle distortion in the fabric of space. It's as if something's shifting, the communication officer reported. I'm not sure what. Before he could finish his sentence, the first explosion ripped through the hull of the Tyrannox. The shockwave sent Drath sprawling to the floor as the lights in the command center flickered. Panic spread quickly as alarms blared, and crew members scrambled for control. Damage report, Drath shouted, rising to his feet and grabbing hold of a support rail. His heart pounded in his chest. Shields are down by 40%, Commander. We've been hit by something. Weapon fire we can't identify. Cyrith responded, his voice tight with shock. And then it happened again. The ships hidden in the shadow of the asteroid field emerged like ghosts, massive, hulking, and black as the void itself. The vengeful dawn, leading the charge, was a nightmare come to life. Its cannons fired again, and the Tyrannox shuddered as a second blast tore through its midsection, ripping through the Kreth's reinforced armor. Return fire. Drath roared, struggling to remain calm. But his orders were met with chaos. The Kreth ships were unprepared for the sheer power and speed of the Deathworlders. The massive human ships tore through their ranks like wolves in a sheep pen, unloading hellish volleys of fire. Nothing in the Kreth arsenal was designed to withstand such an assault. And then, as the Deathworlder ships moved in, there was no more hope for negotiation or diplomacy. The moment the vengeful dawn appeared in full force, it was clear that mercy wasn't part of the equation. Human warships, slow and methodical, closed in with lethal intent. Shields are failing. We can't hold out much longer, the tactical officer yelled. Drath's mind raced. This wasn't a fight. This was an annihilation. The Kreth fleet, despite its numerical superiority, was no match for the human onslaught. The Tyrannox shuddered again as another blast struck, this time near the engine core. This is madness, Drath muttered under his breath. The confident, calculating leaders of the Kreth had miscalculated everything. They had underestimated humanity. And now, in the heart of the battle, they were paying the price. Abort. Full retreat. Drath bellowed, but it was too late. The human ships had already surrounded them, and escape was impossible. Just as his fleet turned to flee, a human boarding party launched from a ship directly above them. The Kreth bridge crew watched in horror as armed Deathworlder soldiers stormed their vessel with chilling efficiency, cutting through their defenses with no hesitation. And the worst part, Drath realized with a sickening certainty the Deathworlders hadn't just come to destroy. They'd come to make a statement. The galaxy would soon know that humanity was not a race to be trifled with. The Tyrannox's hull groaned as another salvo from the vengeful Dawn cracked through its shields. The once proud Kreth flagship, now burning and fragmented, began to drift slowly, its engines sputtering and failing under the relentless assault. Drath Ver, his hand still gripping the console, struggled to regain some semblance of control over the rapidly deteriorating situation. His crew, once confident and poised, had turned into a panicked mob, scrambling to keep their ship intact. Redirect all firepower to the remaining Kreth ships. Alana Graves' voice crackled over the comms, cold and commanding. The human fleet had no interest in mercy. They had come to destroy, and that was precisely what they were doing. The vengeful Dawn and its allies cut through the enemy like a knife through soft flesh, obliterating every obstacle in their path. The Kreth ships, though swift and maneuverable, were powerless against the sheer force of the human assault. Deathworlder warships, designed to survive in the most hostile environments and heavily armed with weapons that could tear through the hardest of materials, now tore through the Kreth defenses with terrifying ease. Their cannons fired with brutal accuracy, punching through shields and cutting through ships in mere seconds. But it wasn't just the heavy artillery that turned the tide. It was the humans themselves. Alana's flagship was the spearhead, leading the charge into the heart of the enemy fleet. As her ship closed in on the Tyrannox, a series of smaller, heavily armed boarding pods launched from the vengeful Dawn. These pods, smaller than the Kreth vessels, were designed for one purpose: infiltration and destruction. Each pod contained a team of elite human soldiers, specialized in close-quarters combat, stealth operations, and the brutal art of war. They didn't rely on sophisticated tactics or expensive tech. These soldiers were warriors, forged by necessity, honed in the brutal conditions of the Deathworlds. The first pod landed on the Tyrannox with a deafening crash, punctuated by the explosive force of its hull breaching the alien ship. The doors of the pod hissed open, and within seconds, the human soldiers were pouring out, armed with weapons that could rip through Kreth armor and walls alike. Their tactics were ruthless. No hesitation, no mercy. "Push forward," screamed Sergeant Harlow, the lead officer of the boarding party. "Take no prisoners." The humans moved like a wave of destruction. Kreth soldiers, trained in strategy and diplomacy, were caught completely off guard by the ferocity and speed of their attackers. The Deathworlder soldiers didn't engage in long, drawn-out battles. They attacked fast and hard, striking with deadly precision. In moments, the Kreth were overwhelmed. On the Tyrannox bridge, Drath Ver watched helplessly as human soldiers flooded the corridors, cutting down his crew with terrifying efficiency. Their weapons fired without pause, and the screams of the wounded echoed through the walls. The once pristine halls of the Kreth flagship were now littered with the bodies of his people. The ship was being turned into a tomb. "Send out a distress call. Reinforcements." Drath's voice cracked, but the words died in his throat as another explosion rocked the bridge. His last hope for a rescue faded as the lights flickered and went out, leaving only the cold, crushing silence of imminent defeat. Alana watched the chaos unfold from her command station, a faint smile crossing her lips. It wasn't that she relished the carnage. It was that she understood its necessity. The galaxy needed to know that humanity was no longer content to be a passive observer. The Deathworlders would be feared, respected, and most importantly, never ignored again. Her voice echoed through the comms once more, this time amplified across the entire Kreth fleet. "This is Commander Alana Graves of the Deathworlder fleet. Let this be a warning to all who underestimate us. Your fight is over." With that, the vengeful Dawn delivered its final blow to the Tyrannox, sending it spiraling into the black void of space. The remaining Kreth ships, already crippled and in disarray, had no chance of surviving. Within moments, they too were torn apart by the Deathworlder assault. As the last of the Kreth fleet burned, Alana stood in the center of the bridge, her face as cold and resolute as ever. Her crew, standing at attention, silently awaited her next command. "Move to the next phase," Alana ordered, her voice steady and emotionless. "The message has been delivered." The vengeful dawn and its fleet drifted away from the wreckage of the Kreth ships. The galaxy had just witnessed a display of unmatched power, and the Deathworlders were no longer just a myth. They were a force to be reckoned with. The remnants of the Kreth fleet drifted in space, their once mighty warships now nothing more than shattered wreckage. The Tyrannox lay in ruin, its core exposed to the void as debris floated freely around it. The battle, swift and decisive, had been won by the Deathworlders, but the cost of the victory was felt throughout the galaxy. The Kreth had been decimated in mere hours, their grand fleet obliterated without mercy. Alana Graves stood on the observation deck of the Vengeful Dawn, her gaze fixed on the wreckage below. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter now, as if the universe itself was bearing witness to the brutality of the Deathworlders' dominance. Her crew moved in the background, performing their tasks with quiet efficiency, but the weight of the victory hung heavy in the air. They knew what they had just accomplished. The Kreth were a powerful force in the galaxy. Now, they were a footnote. "Commander," Kellen's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood at her side, his expression as stoic as ever, but there was a hint of respect in his eyes. "The rest of the galaxy is going to notice this. The Kreth were one of the most feared species. You've just shattered that fear." Alana's lips curled into a small, grim smile. "Let them notice. Let them see what happens when they underestimate humanity." The crew knew that the victory was not just a military one. It was a message. The Deathworlders were no longer a fringe power, lurking in the shadows of the galaxy. They were a force of nature, one that couldn't be ignored, and one that would not be easily stopped. They had crushed the Kreth in a single brutal strike. What did that say about humanity's potential? But even as Alana stood in the aftermath of the battle, she knew that this was just the beginning. The Kreth had been the first, but they wouldn't be the last. There were other powers in the galaxy, alien empires that had watched from the sidelines, waiting for their opportunity to strike. Now they would be forced to choose: recognize the Deathworlders as a dominant force, or face the consequences. "Commander, we've intercepted a transmission from the Federation." Cyrith's voice came through the comms. "They're requesting a meeting." Alana raised an eyebrow. The Federation was a coalition of several species, none of whom had shown any interest in the Deathworlders up until now. They had long viewed humanity as a growing threat, but they had underestimated just how far that threat had come. The message was clear. They wanted to negotiate, to understand the full extent of what the humans were capable of. "Put them through," Alana said, her voice steady. Moments later, a holographic projection appeared in front of her. A tall, slender alien with bright purple skin and a finely tailored uniform stood in front of her. His face was stern, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Commander Graves," the alien began, his voice smooth but tinged with an underlying tension. "I am Consul Virik of the Federation. We request an urgent dialogue with you regarding your actions against the Kreth. This level of aggression has far-reaching consequences, and we must discuss the future of human involvement in galactic affairs." Alana studied the consul carefully. He was trying to maintain control, but it was clear that the Federation was rattled. The Kreth had been a major player in galactic politics, and now their defeat had sent shockwaves throughout the entire region. "I'm listening," Alana replied, her tone cold and unwavering. "But know this, humanity doesn't negotiate from a position of weakness. The Kreth are gone, and you will have to decide where you stand." Virik's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "You misunderstand. We don't seek to oppose you, Commander. But you've altered the balance of power. There are consequences to such actions." Alana leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "The consequences are simple: respect or resistance. Take your pick." The projection flickered out as the Federation console fell silent, and Alana turned her attention back to the vast emptiness of space. The message had been delivered, and it was clear there would be no backing down now. The galaxy had been put on notice. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they would no longer be ignored. She turned to Kellen, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Prepare the fleet. We're not finished yet." The vengeful dawn drifted silently in the vastness of space, its silhouette a dark specter against the stars. Alana Graves stood at the bridge, her posture as unyielding as the ship itself. Her thoughts lingered on the encounter with the Federation. They had been quick to react, sending a high-ranking representative the moment they realized what the Deathworlders were capable of. But Alana knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a far greater confrontation. "Commander," Kellen's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone heavy. "We're picking up more signals. Multiple ships, Federation, from the looks of it. They're gathering near our position." Alana's expression didn't change. The Federation was trying to flex its muscle, sending ships to monitor the situation. But Alana knew the truth. They were trying to intimidate. They had seen the Kreth fleet fall in a matter of hours, and now they needed to determine if humanity was really a threat or a fluke. "Open a channel," Alana ordered, her voice calm and cold. The communication officer nodded, and within moments, a holographic image of Consul Virik appeared once again. His regal purple face was now set in a stern expression, the nervous energy from their last conversation replaced by a more calculated, yet still cautious, demeanor. "Commander Graves," Virik said, his voice sharp, "we need to talk. You have made an unprecedented move in galactic affairs, and we are requesting an explanation. What is it you want from the Federation?" Alana tilted her head slightly, studying the consul's posture. The Federation's concern was clear. They feared what humanity might do next, but they also saw an opportunity. The human fleet was now one of the most powerful in the galaxy, and they knew it. "I don't want anything from the Federation," Alana replied evenly, her eyes never leaving the projection. "But you have two choices. You can either accept humanity's rise and respect our position in this galaxy, or you can resist and face the consequences, just like the Kreth." Virik's eyes narrowed, his face betraying a flicker of frustration. "You've underestimated the Federation's unity, Commander. We will not allow any species, even one as formidable as yours, to destabilize the balance we fought so long to maintain. We'll unite our forces and stop you before you get any further." Alana's lips curled into a cold smile. That's what the Kreth thought, too. The consul's face stiffened, but he quickly regained composure. "We'll see about that. I hope you understand the severity of what you've done." The hologram flickered out, leaving a quiet, tense silence on the bridge. Alana let out a slow breath, her mind already calculating the next move. "Status report," she said, her voice commanding but composed. "We've detected multiple Federation fleets converging on our location, Commander," Kellen replied, his eyes scanning the monitors. "They're not yet in firing range, but they're approaching fast. If they were planning on confrontation, they won't waste any time." Alana nodded, her eyes flicking to the screen. The Federation was serious. They had gathered their strength, perhaps not with the immediate intention of fighting, but to show their force. They were hoping humanity would flinch, but Alana knew better. The Deathworlders didn't flinch. "Prepare our fleet. Full readiness. Stealth systems engage. I want all ships at battle stations, but I don't want to fire unless provoked." Kellen gave a curt nod. "Understood." Alana turned away from the monitors and gazed out at the stars once again. The Federation might have a united front, but Alana knew that unity had its cracks. The various species that made up the Federation had different agendas, different fears, and different ambitions. The Deathworlders weren't just a threat. They were an opportunity. An opportunity the Federation couldn't afford to ignore, no matter how much they pretended to stand in opposition. But Alana didn't need to negotiate. Humanity had already proven its strength. Now it was about maintaining that power, showing the galaxy that the Deathworlders were no longer just survivors of hostile planets. They were conquerors in their own right. "Commander," Kellen spoke again, his voice serious. "There's something else you should know. There are rumors from the Outer Rim. Some of the smaller factions, ones we haven't even fully encountered, are already starting to take notice of our victory over the Kreth. They're rallying. Some are even asking for alliances, or offering tribute." Alana raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the news. "Tribute?" Kellen nodded. "They're afraid, Commander. Afraid of what we could do next." Alana smiled, the edge in her voice sharper now. "Let them be afraid. The galaxy will learn that we're not just another species in the mix. We will dictate the future, not the Federation." She turned back to the screen, her eyes narrowing. The Federation was gathering its forces, but Alana knew something they didn't. The Deathworlders were already ahead of them, and by the time the galaxy realized what had happened, it would be too late. The hum of the engines was a steady background noise on the Vengeful Dawn, but the tension on the bridge was anything but steady. Alana Graves stood in front of the view screen, her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the approaching Federation fleet. They were coming in force now, their ships spread out in a defensive formation, though no shots had been fired. It was as if they were testing humanity's resolve, seeing if they could break the newfound power in the galaxy with mere presence. The Vengeful Dawn was ready, its weapons primed, and its stealth systems engaged. Alana's fleet was smaller in number, but it was much more advanced, its combat training honed from the harshest environments imaginable. She knew the Federation had the advantage in sheer numbers, but she didn't intend to rely on numbers alone. Kellen approached her from the tactical station, his voice low and focused. "Commander, the Federation fleet is within range. They've set up a perimeter around us, likely to box us in. No way out unless we push through." Alana turned toward him, her gaze unwavering. "They're trying to corner us, but they're not prepared for us to make the first move." Her voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel behind it. The Deathworlders weren't just going to cower in front of a few fleets. Humanity had already proven their power in the destruction of the Kreth. Now was the time to show that they would fight for their place in the galaxy, no matter who stood in their way. "Set a course for the center of their formation," Alana ordered. "We're going to break their line." There was a brief moment of hesitation from Kellen, then he nodded. "Understood," preparing to engage. The command was clear. The Vengeful Dawn and its fleet were not going to wait for a battle to be forced on them. They would strike first. As the human fleet powered up, the Federation ships positioned themselves, hoping to set a trap for the smaller fleet. But Alana's tactics were unorthodox. She wasn't concerned with tradition, or the ways the Federation thought a battle would unfold. The ship's engines roared to life as the Vengeful Dawn surged forward, cutting through the space between them and the enemy. The other ships in her fleet followed, maintaining tight formation. Alana watched with a cold, calculating gaze as the Federation fleet's perimeter began to collapse, forced to react to the unexpected move. "Enemy fleet closing in," Kellen called out, his eyes flicking over the monitors. "They're adjusting fire, getting into position to engage." "Let them," Alana replied, a thin smile crossing her face. "Prepare our counterstrike. Once they're within range, we open fire." Seconds stretched into eternity as the two fleets closed the distance. The tension was palpable, a fragile quiet before the inevitable clash. Then, with a series of violent explosions, the first shots rang out. Federation ships fired warning shots, but Alana didn't flinch. Her fleet had already entered battle mode, expertly dodging the incoming fire, returning it with precision. The Vengeful Dawn unleashed its first volley, a barrage of high-powered plasma blasts that tore through the shields of the lead Federation ship. The enemy ship shook violently under the impact, its shields flaring before they collapsed entirely. Alana didn't wait for the enemy's retaliation. She'd taken the first shot, and now her fleet was fully engaged. "Commander," Kellen called out, his voice tinged with urgency. "We've breached their line. Several Federation ships are down." Alana's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the battlefield. The Federation was scrambling now, unsure how to handle the assault. They had anticipated resistance, but not this level of force. The human fleet was relentless, each ship moving with purpose, their attacks fast and effective. The Federation, for all its numbers and resources, was starting to fall back. "Don't let up," Alana commanded. "Keep pressing forward. We'll break their resolve." As the battle raged on, the Federation fleet began to falter. Their ships, while numerous, weren't prepared for the shock and awe of the Deathworlder's unrelenting advance. Each Federation ship that fell added weight to the realization spreading through their ranks. Humanity wasn't going to be cowed. Not anymore. But just as the tide seemed to turn in favor of the Deathworlders, a sudden shift in the Federation's tactics took Alana by surprise. A large Federation cruiser, heavily armed and heavily shielded, moved into the fray, pushing its way through the chaos. This was the kind of ship designed to stand firm in the face of any assault. But it wasn't the ship itself that drew Alana's attention. It was the battle flag flying from its command tower. It was the flag of the Federation High Command. "Commander Graves," Kellen said, his voice laced with surprise. "That ship, it's not just a cruiser. It's the Resolute, the flagship of the Federation's military forces." Alana's expression remained calm, though she could feel a sense of gravity settle over her. The Resolute was not just any ship. It was a symbol of Federation dominance, a show of force, and its arrival signaled that the Federation was no longer playing around. "They'd brought in their heavy hitter," Alana said quietly, but with a fierce resolve. "Prepare to engage. If they want a war, we'll give them one." The battle had reached a fever pitch. The Vengeful Dawn and its fleet were locked in a fierce struggle with the Federation's forces, now more determined than ever after the arrival of the Resolute, the Federation's flagship. Its massive presence loomed over the battlefield, dwarfing all nearby ships, but Alana Graves remained unshaken. The human fleet, though outnumbered, was composed of soldiers and ships that had been forged in the crucible of some of the most dangerous environments in the galaxy. They didn't back down. They fought with the raw, savage power of those who had survived the worst the universe could throw at them. "Enemy shields at 45%, Kellen reported, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding on the screens. "The Resolute is holding strong, but they've taken heavy damage to their outer hull." Alana nodded, her gaze fixed on the massive Federation flagship. The Resolute was a symbol of power, but now it was showing its first signs of vulnerability. She had expected nothing less. The Federation had assumed their sheer size and advanced technology would be enough to intimidate the Deathworlders. But Alana had already shown them that strength alone wouldn't win a battle. It was about the will to fight and the precision to execute. "Send the order," Alana said coldly, her voice unwavering. "Target the Resolute's propulsion. We need to cripple their ability to maneuver." Her command was clear, and the fleet responded with practiced efficiency. The human warships focused their fire, their weapons tearing into the Resolute's engines with pinpoint accuracy. The Federation flagship tried to retaliate, launching a volley of powerful missiles, but the Deathworlders were prepared. The Vengeful Dawn deployed its own countermeasures, laser grids and energy shields, deflecting most of the missiles, and the few that made it through were intercepted by smaller human ships in a coordinated defense. "Direct hit on the propulsion systems," Kellen reported moments later, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "Their engines are destabilizing. The Resolute is now drifting." The Federation flagship was no longer able to maneuver, a crucial advantage now in the hands of the humans. Alana's fleet moved in, closing the distance with brutal efficiency. Federation ships attempted to regroup, but the damage was done. The heart of their command had been shattered, and the fear that had gripped their forces began to spread. "Commander Graves," came a voice from one of the tactical officers, his tone hesitant. "Federation reinforcements are inbound. Several fleets are on the way from the outer rim. They'll arrive in." "I know," Alana interrupted, her voice sharp. We don't have time to waste. The Deathworlder fleet didn't need time. They needed precision, and they had it in abundance. The moment the Resolute's defenses were compromised, Alana issued the order to board it. A series of sleek, heavily armed boarding pods launched from the Vengeful Dawn, each carrying elite soldiers trained to assault and disable any ship, no matter how fortified. The pods hit the Resolute with explosive force, breaching the hull in multiple places. The human soldiers poured into the flagship, their weapons quick and brutal, cutting down Federation soldiers in their path. The humans were ruthless, efficient. No tactics were wasted on mercy. This was war, and war had no place for weakness. All boarding teams are engaged. Sergeant Harlow's voice crackled over the comms. We've secured most of the critical areas. The bridge is next. Alana's face hardened as she listened. This wasn't just a military conquest. It was a statement. The Federation had believed they could control the galaxy, that their unity would keep the lesser species in line. But now, the Deathworlders were forcing them to recognize one simple truth. Humanity would no longer be a subject. They would be a power to rival any other. On the Resolute's bridge, Consul Virek watched in horror as the humans overran their defenses. His face was pale, his thoughts a blur of disbelief. The flagship of the Federation was being brought to its knees by a species they had long underestimated. How had it come to this? We surrender, he said through clenched teeth, his voice hoarse. End this now, Commander. You've proven your point. Alana stood on the Vengeful Dawn, watching the last of the Federation's resistance crumble. The Resolute was now in human hands, its systems being reprogrammed by their elite engineers. It was a clear signal to the entire galaxy. The Federation had underestimated humanity, and now they had no choice but to accept that fact. I don't think you understand, Consul, Alana said calmly, her voice carrying over the comms. This isn't just about proving a point. This is about the future, and humanity is going to shape it. The Federation's once mighty flagship was now nothing more than a trophy in the hands of the Deathworlders. The Vengeful Dawn moved away from the wreckage of the Resolute, its fleet now fully in control of the battlefield. The Federation had been humbled. The Kreth were gone. And humanity, for the first time in galactic history, had established itself as an undeniable force, one that no one, not even the Federation, could ignore. Alana looked out at the stars once more, her expression unreadable. This was only the beginning.